Welcome to Heal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Hey guys, real quick, before we jump into the episode, I need you to do the 3 S's for me. What is that? First of all, I need you to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss an episode of our podcast. Number 2, I need you to share it with your family and friends. Don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else. Lastly, I need you to say something. Leave us a comment. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you want to see from us, what you like, what you don't like. We are open to your suggestions. We want to know everything that you want to let us know about the podcast. All right. Now, get back to the episode. All right. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. Therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you listen, like, subscribe, and share on all of your podcast listening platforms. Also, make sure you guys are checking us out on our new YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network, where you will find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, as well as the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast that you are watching right now. So again, make sure you check us out. You'll find the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, as well as the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast on our YouTube channel, the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. Make sure you guys go and check us out there. We also have some more podcasts that we're going to be bringing to you. Also, our podcast is sponsored by our school community, the Deal to Heal School for Living community that we have on the new school platform. All the ways to help us to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problems, heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. There we bring you more resources and workshops in order to help you on your journey. You try it for the first 7 days. You can check it out absolutely free and see if you like it. And if you do like it, then it's only $27 a month. And each month you'll have access to a new workshop. So make sure you guys go to the Deal to Heal School for Living on the school platform, or just scan the QR code in the upper corner and it will take you right there. So make sure you guys go and check that out. All right. So today, just like any other day, we are blessed with the guest, Miss Crystal. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing well as well. Definitely, first thing I want to say thank you for being here, because you could have been doing anything else or anyone else, but you're here with me and my listeners, and I definitely appreciate it. So, Crystal, we're going to jump right into this thing. Do me a favor, introduce yourself to my audience. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Hi, my name is Crystal King Iwuoma, and what I do is I've started a ministry called A Legacy of Love Ministry. I also speak to widows and widowers, and I'm also a baker. And so my baker business is Serendipity Tasty Treats, but my heart right now is into A Legacy of Love Ministry. And
All right.
so I am just delighted to be here for you to give me this opportunity to be on your platform. It is truly a blessing.
No problem, no problem. Again, I want to say thank you for being here, because you could have been doing anything else or anyone else, but you're here with us, and we definitely appreciate it. And so I want to jump right into this thing, Crystal, because I know you started this ministry, A Legacy of Love, but it wasn't voluntarily, should I say. So
Absolutely.
tell us first, let's go back a little bit. Tell us, who was Crystal and what was your life like before the passing of your husband, which started this whole thing. So who was Crystal and what was that life like beforehand? And then what was kind of that, the event of it that happened that made you, decide, not only after coming through the event yourself, but then also decide, what, let me see if I can help other people through this as well.
Well, it's funny that you said who was Crystal because I found that I had lost myself in who Crystal was, in
Mhm.
being that mother and being the wife and being the aunt and that close friend that always had the answers for everything and that always had things in place. And so when I lost my husband unexpectedly, um, it just kind of it made you think, who am I now? Because
Mhm.
you give your life up for your family. You
Right.
realize that you give your life up for your family when you feel like you have nothing left to live for. So I found myself actually sitting on the couch thinking to myself that there's nothing else for me. And my daughter asked me, she said, "Well, Mom, you think that just dad was the only thing that you had a reason for living for?" And I told her, I said, "Well, you guys are grown. Um, he's gone. And so what do I have? Because that's how much of a service I was to my
Mhm.
family, to my husband, to my children. And I felt like just even in not being able to serve the way that I did my family, it just kind of gave me a like, I don't have any more purpose. But I
Mhm.
learned later that, you know what, there is more for me. There is. So I'm learning who Crystal is now because I lost myself within my family with just day to day living. And so um, me and my husband, Reginald, were married for 34 years. We had three children, eight grandchildren now, and I lost him unexpectedly. He was going to be having a colonoscopy done and decided to shave his backside, right? And I was telling him, I said, they really don't care, but he had let me know that because he thought he had like a bump on his backside. And so he was asking me, can you see? Because this is really hurting. And so he went ahead and went to work, wasn't feeling well, and it ended up turning into gangrene. And so
Mhm.
later, he had surgery, and then after the surgery, his body went septic, and so he was gone that quick. It was just like he was
Wow.
gone in a matter of a moment. So it went from me talking to the nurses and, he's doing better. He would maybe had to go back in for another surgery, but um, it was just that quick that the 34 years of our marriage, it was over. It was unexpectedly. And so I started kind of thinking about the men in my life because I had recently lost my brother 2 years prior, and then I had lost my dad. And so it was like, wait a minute, now all the men that are, mean so much to me are gone. And so now, what do you do? How do you handle this when those people that were so significant to my life are no longer here?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's wow. That's definitely one that it changes really quick. You go in for one thing and then everything changes within a time period. And I
Hmm.
also kind of relate, with the losing yourself with your family. Not only when someone passes, but even like myself of going through a divorce,
Hmm.
and coming through COVID. Going through a divorce during
Hmm.
that time, and so many things changed during COVID. that I found myself having them same thoughts, like, who am I now? Because my kids
Yeah.
were young adults, had became young adults, and then I
Mm-hmm.
ended up going through a divorce. So it's like, so I'm not the father that I was, still a father, but different. But your kids is not, you go from in the home to outside the home, and then you're like, all right, now what do I do? And you're
Right.
really trying to find.
Especially when you find yourself, we were just empty nesters. We had just purchased our home. So it was like you're thinking, okay, this is supposed to be good. I've already was struggling with the fact that the kids had moved out. So it was like, I mean, just with them going to college, I was like, oh God, and then when they moved out, it was like, okay, now we can start spending time together. And
Mhm.
everything just happened so fast that we didn't really get, we had maybe 2.5 years of just being in the home alone, so now it's really, just alone. So you know
Yeah,
how your mind gets to going when you're alone for so long.
yeah, yeah. So how was that? I think about that grieving process. Of definitely unexpectedly, having to,
Hmm.
lose your husband, but then having to go through that process. And then even as you said now, with the kids going, so you kind of left to yourself a lot during that time period. And I
Hmm.
remember even after my mom passed, kind of dealing with those grief experiences myself. So how was it? How did you handle the grief process, and kind of how did it affect you? How did it kind of show itself? Because it shows itself in different ways. You
Yeah.
definitely go through all the emotions, but everybody
Hmm.
doesn't experience it the same. So how was kind of your grief experience, and then how did you kind of navigate your way through that?
Well, mine was pretty rough. It was pretty rough because we're a Christian family, and so where um, me praying and having everybody else praying for him to pull through, this, because my husband was a truck driver. And so he
Mhm.
was actually at work when he had started getting sick. And so I'm praying, Lord, let him make it back home. And so he made it back home, but it was the prayers that were all week long. And I mean, I had every bishop, pastor, evangelist, anybody I knew that can pray was praying. And then so when he made it home and he was able to get to the hospital, I was like, okay, that the prayers worked. So when he passed away, I was just disappointed. I wasn't angry at God, but I was very disappointed. Like,
Mhm.
God, how could you let this happen to us? How could you let that happen to me as your daughter, as your child? And so I couldn't understand, like, how did it switch? So I was frustrated and I was thinking to myself, this whole thing is a hoax. Like, I don't want to do this Christian thing anymore. I don't know if I want to believe in heaven. I don't know if I want to believe in a lot of things, because I was just so disappointed.
Yeah.
And so some of my nephew has said, no, Auntie Crystal, not you, because I'm pretty much the one that is, show the walk. I walk what I talk. And so he was like, no, not you, Auntie Crystal. You can't give up like that. You're like, you are, we have that we look up to. And I was like, yes, me, I don't want to do this no more. And so I was telling one of my friends, I don't want to do this no more. And so certainly, I didn't want to hurt myself, but I didn't want to be here anymore. And so I found myself even in just just laying in the bed telling myself, you better breathe, because apparently I was holding my breath that long. Like, I said, oh, I know what's going to happen. If you probably took him because I'm going to go, so you just start feeling like you're not going to be here any longer. And so, I would say maybe some months later, because what I did was because I was so used to serving, I went down to my relative, I went down to my kids' house, I went to my friend's house, I went to my cousin's house, and I was just down there cleaning and cooking for them and just, trying to
Mhm.
get it out of my system, that servant, thing. And so I have to tell you, I got about 3 or 4 people keys to their house. Like my bestie husband told me, he said, you can move in, you don't have to pay us nothing, just cook. And so, um, and they would just say, well, you know what you cooking now? I would go shopping, I would come back and I would cook. And I got a lot of that out of me, just serving other people. And so when I got back home, because I probably stayed down um, with family members for about maybe, I realized it now that it was about 6 months maybe. I didn't even really come home. I would come home and get some clothes and then I would go back down. And I I heard from the Lord that He said, because I was like, how are you saying that you won't put more on me than I can handle? And I'm feeling like I can't handle this.
Mhm.
But as I evaluated it later and realized what my husband went through and what he would be like today here, not at full capacity of being able to go to work and do things like that, I realized that God said that now that would have been more than you can handle because I wouldn't have been
Mhm.
able to handle him, to take care of him. And I know you couldn't take work away from him. You couldn't take having intercourse away from him. You could not take, this is a man that was so prideful, just had a little piece of fungus on his foot and like, let me get my socks, it's just like so private. And so I said, well, that's true. And I have a couple of friends that is challenged with that right now. And I was like, I just wouldn't have been able to take care of him. I feel like he would have been mean. I don't know if he would have tried to take his own life,
Mhm.
because of, the position that he would have been in. So what I did is I just inadvertently changed that and realized that God is sovereign and that He allowed me to have that marriage for 34 years, and that I just changed the perspective of it, that everybody does not have the opportunity to have the opportunity that I had, and the blessing that I had, and the love that I had. And that's what kind of helped me start getting out of it and talking to a lot of other widows and just, expressing how I felt and how they felt. And that's what kind of pulled me up out of it,
Yeah, yeah.
just,
Well,
to change that.
yeah, I want to go back to a couple of things you said. One,
Hmm.
I want to thank you, number one, and then also acknowledge the fact of you even being open enough to share that you were angry with God, right? Because a lot of
Hmm.
times we go through different things, and when we talk about our emotions and how we felt, a lot of times, especially as Christians, we leave that one out. You know what I mean? It's like, well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want anybody to know that, you know what I'm saying? I thought about turning my back on God. But
Right.
it is a true emotion that we feel sometimes. And I'm thankful to you for even admitting that, because a lot of times we think because we're Christians, we're not supposed to go through things, right?
Right.
And we're like, no, you're
Hmm.
still a person. And as a
That's
person,
right.
there are things just as a human being that you have to go through. And, even the Bible
Hmm.
says there's nothing new under the sun. So it's like, you're not the first one to
Hmm.
lose a loved one. You're not,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like this is the
Right.
cycle of life, and this is how it goes. Um,
Hmm.
and because of that, when we deal with that grief, sometimes we like, Lord, like you let me down. Like I've been serving
Yeah.
you, I done did this and that, and then this is what I get, you know.
Right.
And I also like, that you said about even changing your perspective. And I had this conversation. I was a guest on a podcast the other day, and I had this conversation too. I was talking about losing my mom, um,
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity that her sickness gave us as a family. Right. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
my mom passed away from cancer,
Okay.
and from the time that we found out to the time that she passed, it was like 6, 7 months. It was like quick, you
Wow.
know. Um, but one thing my mom used to always say when we were growing up, I got 8 siblings, so it's 9 of us. So it's my mom,
Oh,
dad,
wow.
and eight siblings or 9 kids. And one thing my mom used to always say, when we were growing up, she used to always say, I hope nothing never happens to me that I have to depend on my kids to take care of me. Right. And
Yeah.
we were good kids. But she would always say this,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd always be like, Ma, like if anything ever happens to you, we got you.
Right.
And
Right.
I don't know. And I still say I believe that it was God knowing the beginning, knowing the end from the beginning, that gave
Mm-hmm.
her that to say to us, because it's planted the seed in us that, okay, if anything does happen, I'm going to show up, and then years
Yeah.
later, when it did happen, again, I say her sickness gave us the opportunity to show her that we would show up. You know what I mean? It gave us the
Yeah.
opportunity to
Yeah.
actually show up and say,
Mm-hmm.
"Look,
Mm-hmm.
mom, we always told you we had you, and now we're able to actually have you and love you and
Mm-hmm.
support you. During that time period." And it does take a mindset shift sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
I know we'll get to this a little later, but I want to mention it now, even about having your affairs in order right beforehand,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Right. Right.
one of the things that we kind of went through, and I hope my family don't mind me saying it, but they don't be watching anyway. But after my mom
It's the
passed,
family, right?
right? After my mom passed, my dad was talking to us about, he getting his stuff in order. And one of the things that he put in place was a DNR, a do not resuscitate. Right. So he's like, hey, if
Mm-hmm.
anything happened to me, like, don't bring me back, don't bring me back. And,
Right.
some of my family members took that kind of hard, like, no, why would you do that? And I had to explain to them, like, his mom's gone, his dad's gone,
Mm-hmm.
majority of his friends gone. I think two of my uncles had passed away. Maybe two of
Mm-hmm.
my aunts had passed away, and my mom. I'm like, you got to look at it from his perspective. Like, all of
Yeah.
his loved ones has passed away. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so he's not
Mm-hmm.
saying that I'm ready to check out, but he's saying if I
Right.
do, do not bring me back. You
Don't
know.
bring me back.
And I said,
It's funny you
you
said
gotta
that because
honor
my
that.
mom told me that she did that. And I was like, what the world? But she's going to be 90 this month, right? So I was like, so she is the matriarch, but I just never would have thought. I'm glad she told me that because I never would have thought. And then they started saying, when they're older, their bone, their ribs crush and stuff when they're trying to, do CPR. But I was like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, but that's something that generally you don't think about.
mhm,
And those are some of the things that and I always say that there's a blessing in everything. There's good and bad in
yeah,
everything, and
that's true.
sometimes the worst things allow us to come face to face with some of the best things. And so
Yeah,
when you lose someone, it allows you to come face to face with the fact that you're still here. And like you said, that
yeah,
you still have a purpose, and that there's something that you're supposed to be doing here, which you begin to find, that space for yourself when you started to talk
yeah.
to the other widows and widowers. So how did that start? Even starting to build that movement that you've started now, and how has that been?
Mhm.
Just connecting with them and kind of walking them through this journey as well.
Yeah, it's something. I wanted to go back to one thing that you said before I go to that, and that was that you guys had that, though it was a short period of time that 6 to 7 months with your mom, that you had that time to, talk and get things together, have that. And that's what I so sadly did not have. So
Mm,
that's why it's so important that we love on our loved ones, because we never know, right? So
mm,
I was like, there is nothing, no deny, no regrets that I have, that my husband knew I loved him and that I knew he loved me. Except for the one thing, when they took him out of the house in the ambulance, it was like I was trying to be out the way. So I was thinking, oh, well, let me, be out the way instead of trying to, let me get a kiss and, all of that. So I was thinking, oh my God, I found myself draped over the casket, because in my mind, I was like, oh my God, I didn't get to give him a last kiss. And so I just remember kissing him, in his face, his forehead, just kissing him and just telling him what good of a run that we did with one another.
mm,
And that, and I'm just so happy that he know that I loved him unconditionally. So I didn't allow the enemy to keep beating me up about stuff
mm,
like, well, you didn't get a chance to tell him you love him. Even though I told the nurse, I said, well, you let him know that his honey boo loves him, and I'm going to be at the hospital as soon as I can get there. And so,
mm,
she told him, but sometime I'll kind of be like, oh, but because of us not knowing if we can lose someone unexpectedly, that's the part that I missed, that I didn't get to, have some more conversations with him. And
mhm,
so I'm I'm thankful that you guys had that opportunity, even though it wasn't, the best time for her,
mhm,
but that you had the time to communicate and know that she knew, hey, my kids had my back, like,
mm,
like they said they did. Yeah, yeah.
mm. Yeah.
So with the what happened is I started writing. And so I would just be writing all day. That's how I ended up with the book. So I told his story in one of the books. I told the story about our beginning to our ending. And so we worked at LAX, and I'm from California. So we worked at LAX airport together. We
Mhm,
met, we would see each other kind of like, how you kind of have that little hesitate, like, hey, how you doing? But we both were kind of talking to somebody else, but we dated for 2 weeks. And he asked me to marry him 2 weeks after we dated.
mm,
And we got married 8 months later. And we were married until death did us part 34 years later. And so I love to tell my story because I know that's a unique story. And I didn't realize it until after he had passed away. And I was telling the story. I was like, wow, I really didn't know him. We would just, I said, well, the Bible says man finds a wife, he finds a good thing. So I was like, it just went like that. So my daughter was like, Mama, you didn't really, you would have had a fit. What your parents say? I said, well, you know what? Back then we were all getting married. It was like,
mhm,
go ahead. My dad gave him the okay, but but expecting to be a widow, not at all. I thought that, we had at least till we were 70 years old. I was kept saying, well, Lord, what happened to the promised life? But I had to realize that babies pass away.
mhm,
So we were just kind of taught, well, you know what, the promised life is, a good life is to 70 and above. And so I was like, well, what happened? So, but I started, me and my friend was just playing around, and then I started that YouTube page. And then I was bored and lonely. So then I started my a live Sunday. Every Sunday I would go to church, come home, and then be back feeling, in my grief and feeling lonely. So I started getting on Facebook, And I'm like, hey, happy Sunday. And I would just start telling some things, about what I was going through at the time. And then I just started reaching out to some other widows, like maybe on some other platforms.
Mhm.
And we connected. And then um, there's other widows that have platforms that um, had podcasts that I was on, and then we just became this close knitted community. And it's amazing how every last one of us, when we meet or when we just are interacting, it's like a connection, like we've known each other forever. It's like we know our spouses know each other,
Mhm.
and it's an amazing bond that we have. And it really helps you because people don't understand, especially if you're in a church setting and they're expecting, because you're a Christian and because that God is supposed to just do this thing magical for you. But you
Mhm.
find out later that He allows us to lament, He allows us to express our feelings because He knows what we're going through.
Yeah.
And so when I found out that He talks about widows at least 80 times in the Bible, I said, we have to be important. You can't just talk about the widow mite. We have to be very important to God, that He talks about us that much. And not only that, He says He's our husband. And so where I have my husband at is here. My husband, I said with my mouth that God was the head of my household.
Mhm.
God was my all of that, right? But I didn't realize until after I lost my husband that I had God maybe under my husband, because I felt like when I lost him, I've lost everything. I've
Right.
lost my provider. I've lost my protector, because my husband was that great protector. And so it was like, well, wait a minute. How am I going to do this now? I have to really say that God is all of that for real in my life, because
Mhm.
I don't have him here any longer. And so I've been a entrepreneur, but an entrepreneur to the point where I had to, that was my money. So he was the provider, but that was my money. So I was a stay at home, spouse, wife. So when it came down to, well, wait a minute, what are you going to do now? You've put your whole life on hold besides being an entrepreneur, but I put my life on hold. I'm like, okay, what am I going to do now at my age? Where am I going to work at? And so I am highly dyslexic. And so for a long time, I hid behind my husband. That's why I couldn't work this phone today when you was telling me, because I didn't even get on the computer. He bought me a laptop. I tried to get on. I said, well, how do you get on? And he's like, I don't know. So I put the thing back in the box. So I had not even, I was like, for a lot of things, I've always just kind of hid behind my husband. I was like, boo, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And so to have to be pushed out into this world, this big world that can be cruel sometimes, was very, very, very scary for me. So this, speaking to other widows, and then I started realizing that, you know what? It's almost like they call me the midwife to the widows, because I would literally be on the phone with them for hours and, almost into the next day. Some of them live in New York. They live all over the place.
Mhm.
Chicago they have a strong widow community there. And so and just being able to listen and hear somebody say, you have helped me for me to want to keep on living, to be like you. How do you have, just to cry with them, to to
Mhm.
let them know, hey, I know that pain, because I always say this: if you have not experienced the pain of losing a spouse or whatever loss it is, don't put your mouth on it. Don't say
Mhm.
nothing, because they'll say, well, shouldn't you be over this by now? It's going on 4.5 years for me. I haven't even taken my husband's clothes out the closet. So, his his stuff on, I may have put, but you just have to give people their time, and you can't push them, because it's just difficult. And I always say, if you haven't experienced the loss, then whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, please just don't do it. Look, leave
Yeah.
us alone.
Right. I want to go back to one of the things that you said, as especially as being a Christian, and sometimes feeling like you could just pray everything away. And I remember
Mhm.
coming up, definitely things is changing a little bit now, but I remember coming up and being a PK and growing up in the church, and
Mhm.
it's like it's almost as you had to make a choice, like either you believe God or you go to therapy. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
like there's a spiritual side to you as a human,
Mhm.
but there's a natural side as well. And that natural side needs to be able to express itself. That's how God made
Yes.
us. And so
Mhm.
even when I was going through grieving from my mom, I started taking
Mhm.
bereavement sessions. I joined the bereavement group, and again, going to what you said, that community
Mhm.
of like-minded people who are all understanding what you're dealing with because they've dealt with it or they're going through it at
Mhm.
the same time. It means so much, and it brings so much more
Mhm.
help and strength, to a person when you're able to sit down with someone who can really understand what you're dealing with. And so I think that's why, even the community that you said, like the widows
Mhm.
community, to be able to sit down and say, man, this is what I'm dealing with after losing my spouse, and really be able to talk to you because they know that you actually understand what they're going through. And then for you to have gotten to the
Yeah.
point where you've gathered your strength, and God have strengthened you for this next you know endeavor of your life, to like, okay, now I've made you to be able to be a champion for those who are now coming behind you. And I think that's the blessing of
Yeah.
community. And God gives us that as human beings, and there are some things you just cannot pray
Mhm.
away. Like, you have to deal with
You
grief. You
can.
can't pray it away. It's like
You
you got to
do.
take your time. You got to mourn. You got to grieve. You got to give
Mhm.
grief its space in your life, because once it comes,
Yes.
it's coming. I always say,
It's coming.
once you get on that hamster wheel of grief, you can never get off, right? And so
No.
it's going to show up when it shows up. But if you make space for it and learn to deal with it, and experience it when it comes, then it rolls
Mhm.
a little bit more smoother, and it doesn't
Yes,
necessarily
true.
erupt or interrupt your actual day to day. But if you keep
Right.
pushing it away and not dealing with it,
Yes.
it's going to force its
It's
way
gonna
through.
show up. That's
Yeah.
true. And you can't do grief for anybody else, because
Mhm.
I have a couple of friends that I'm still friends with from kindergarten. And
Mhm.
so one of my friends lost her husband maybe 8 months later, and one of my kindergarten friends. And so she's kind of seeing me, come on podcast. She sees me doing things. And so she's like, you got to help me. You got to help me. Da, da, da. I said, listen, I can't do this for you. I cannot. One thing we cannot do for one another is grief.
Mhm.
You have to do your own grief yourself. It's like,
Mhm.
I said, I still cry. I still have my moments. I still have my blackout curtains. And and sometimes some of us, we're so connected that, you know, um, one of my friends, she'll call and say, hey, what's going on? Hey, open them curtains up, And so
Mhm.
then I just started being thankful each day that I could get up and take a bath, even if I just took a bath and just got back in the bed. I was like, Lord, thank you that I could take a bath. Thank you that I can get up and move, because I know that it can be pretty rough. I've talked to widows that have, didn't come out the room for a whole year almost and still having a really difficult time. Um, I think because of so many things that come up is what brings the grief back. And I can say that for myself is how when different circumstances come up that I've been going through, then the grief really, I mean, just the way of the world is today. I just want to talk to my husband so bad. And my son was like, Mom, I sure wish I could talk to my dad about this, So I'm like, I know, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanna before we get out of here, I want to go talk about the books, because you mentioned, you had wrote a book about you guys' story, but you
Hmm.
also have a journal as well. So tell us about each of the books, and definitely tell us about the journal.
The journal is a 31-day prayer journal. It's God's love for the grieving widow.
Mhm.
And this is for widows only because it's a 31-day prayer journal for widows. And that's me and my baby. And then our other book that I was talking about is There is Beauty in My Brokenness. That's
Mhm.
one is our love story. It's actually what happened to my husband um, until death did us part. And then my third one is No One Plans to Fail, but Many Fail to Plan,
Mhm.
and Divine Direction and Connection. And this one is telling the story of me going through probate and, getting your affairs in order.
Yeah, yeah. And I
Hmm.
think that one is really important. Like I mentioned
Yes.
earlier about the, when my dad with the DNR in place, and things of that nature, like
Hmm.
that stuff you don't necessarily think about, but you do want to make sure that you have those things in order, because we never know, what's going to happen. We
Yeah.
never know what tomorrow may bring, as we often say. So man, Crystal, I
Hmm.
wanna say thank you so very much for coming on, for sharing your story, for sharing your
Hmm.
expertise and your experience, and also for being a beacon of light, for those who have, experienced and unfortunately have joined a club that they definitely didn't sign up for. And I
Sure
often
did
talk
not.
about that. I often talk about that from my point of view of losing my mom, is like, to be a child, no matter how old you
Hmm.
are, but to be a child and to
Hmm.
lose a parent, like we definitely never would have signed up for it. But unfortunately, we're now in a part of this club, you know. Um,
Hmm.
but yet to be not only to be a part of the club, but to be a beacon of light inside of this club, inside of the club, and to be able to help others to get through. I definitely, I'm grateful for the gift that God has given you to be able to be a hope and a light to those who are still in need. So that being said, I want you to have the last word. I want you to leave us with, word of advice, inspiration, however you feel, and then also to um, give us your social media handles and things of that nature where we can find you, right? So I'll give you a couple of
Okay.
seconds to think about that. So to my
Okay.
listeners, while Crystal's thinking, to my listeners, I want to thank you guys for tuning in once again to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Make sure you guys are checking us out on our website, dealhealfulfill.org. Again, that's dealhealfulfill.org, to find out more about us as an organization, what we have going on, and how we're moving. Make sure you guys are going there and check that out. Also, ebooks by ejames.com, which is where my ebooks used to be. They are no longer there, but you still can get all of my ebooks absolutely free when you sign up for the Deal to Heal School for Living, which we talked about at the beginning, which is our sponsor of this podcast. You can scan the QR code in the upper corner in order to check that out. When you check out, the first 7 days is absolutely free. go to the resources tab, and there you will find all the ebooks, and you can just download them. But again, this is where you can find all of our ebooks. Make sure you guys also check out deal2healtees.com. That's deal, the number two, healtees.com, which is our inspirational t-shirt line. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. That is our tagline. Also, we also not only do we have our inspirational tees, but we also have our podcast merch, which is our t-shirts with our podcast logos on it. There's one for the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, as well as one for the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. Make sure you guys are checking that out. Also, over the last couple years, I've been blessed to be a part of an organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And what we do, we have free virtual workshops bi-monthly talking about the topic of forgiveness, forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, forgiveness of the world, and even how unforgiveness affects your body and your health. Is absolutely free. Whenever you're listening to this podcast, either one just ended or there's one coming up. But you can go to forgivenessmission.com in order to sign up for our next free virtual workshop. It is absolutely free, but the information is priceless. Make sure you guys go to forgivenessmission.com in order to sign up for our next virtual workshop. Also, last but not least, one of the things I'm so excited for us that we have just done, we have just started our nonprofit, Deal to Heal the World Incorporated, and we are officially a 501c3 accredited charity. So you guys can go to Deal to Heal the World Incorporated in order to leave us a donation to help us be able to help the community in which we serve. So we want to do more events, more offer more resources for the community, but we want it to be free to the community. But as we know, there is a cost to everything. So your donation would allow us to have events and resources for the community at absolutely no charge for the community. And now those donations will be tax deductible. So make sure you guys look into the descriptions. The link will be in the description that you guys can give us a donation for the Deal to Heal the World Incorporated. So thank you guys once again. Miss Crystal, I want to say thank you for being on. I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
Well, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to come and tell my testimony and share my story with you all on today. We did not get a chance to get into the getting your affairs in order and together before and after loss, but you can always go on to my YouTube page, God's Love for the Grieving Widow. You also can go to my Facebook page. I do a video every Sunday, and that's Crystal King. And I just wanted to leave this with you all is to the importance of getting your affairs in order before and after loss, such as just knowing what the email addresses are, knowing what your loved ones' wishes are. If you can't afford to get insurance, look into paying for your death burial. Look into having some mortgage protection, because I found myself having to inherit a whole house note, and being a stay-at-home wife, it's been quite rough. And so I'm just want to inform and educate you on the importance of getting your affairs in order and in place, and to love on your loved ones, be forgiving, and just love on your loved ones. Love you guys.
All right, all right. We can't end it no better than that. To my listeners, I want to say thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.